We also have with us today Max Caproni, who is the executive director of the Chicago Police Board. Now, Max has served as that executive director since 2004. He manages the day-to-day operations of the police board and also serves as the board secretary. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with the police board, it is the independent civilian body that oversees certain activities of the police department, including certain kinds of the more serious disciplinary matters related to police misconduct. Prior to joining the board, Max was the associate dean of the graduate school and an adjunct professor of political science at Loyola University Chicago. So Max, you are the executive director of an agency that's the longest running of all the civilian oversight entities here in Chicago. So tell us a little bit about the police board and its mission.
Thank you, Sharon. Yeah, I'm happy to do that and happy to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. And on behalf of the police board, I'm pleased to join this group and explain a little bit more and answer questions about what the board does. The police board is made up of 9 civilians. They're all Chicagoans. They all are appointed by the mayor, confirmed by the city council, and serve fixed 5-year terms on the board. They may be reappointed for additional terms. Once they've been on the board for 10 years, they're not eligible for reappointment. So there is some sense of term limits there. They are removed, may be removed only for cause. So they do not serve at the pleasure of any one particular person or agency here within the city. And as Andrea mentioned, just as independence is important to COPA's mission, it's very important to the police board's mission as well. I'm going to highlight 2 areas where the police board plays a role in the police disciplinary process here in Chicago. One is in deciding what we call disagreement cases, and the other is in deciding what we call discharge cases. And I'll share my screen here and maybe make that process a little bit more straightforward. So hopefully I can do this. So first of all, the police board is involved in reviewing and ruling on disagreements between COPA and CPD over the discipline of an officer. So when a disagreement arises between the chief administrator of the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, COPA, and the superintendent of police, the Chicago Municipal Code sets out a process by which that disagreement is resolved if the 2 of them cannot come to an agreement on their own. So if there's a disagreement from the superintendent as to one of COPA's recommendations for discipline, the first thing that they need to do is meet and try to work out that disagreement. If they're not able to do so, then the matter is referred to one member of the police board. That member is randomly chosen from our group of 9 individuals. And within 10 days of receiving the disagreement, they review the chief administrator's recommendation, the superintendent's response to that, and then the chief administrator's objections to the superintendent's written response. Once the reviewing board member conducts that review, they may request additional documentation from the investigation file. It could be body-worn camera videos, could be surveillance videos, it could be the officer's statements to COPA, anything that the board member feels that would be helpful in ruling, they may request. They can also request that the parties appear and argue their positions. Once the board member has reviewed all of the material that has been provided, the board member rules on whether the superintendent met the burden to overcome the chief administrator's recommendation. So the burden is on the superintendent to convince the reviewing board member that the superintendent should prevail and that the chief administrator's recommendation should not move forward. So that's how the municipal code sets up the process. Once the reviewing member makes a decision, there's a written opinion that is sent out to both the chief administrator and the superintendent. That decision is announced at the next police board public meeting, and then the opinion is posted on the website. So that is the process for the disagreements. As far as explaining the outcomes, If the reviewing member rules that the superintendent did not meet the burden of overcoming the chief administrator's recommendation, then the chief administrator's recommendation moves forward over the superintendent's objection. If the reviewing member rules that the superintendent did meet the burden to overcome the recommendation from the chief administrator, then the superintendent's response shall be implemented. So whatever the superintendent recommended will be put forward. So that's the process there for disagreements. And this applies to all disagreements, whether it's on findings of particular allegations, whether it's on the level of disciplinary action that is being recommended. For the most serious cases of alleged misconduct, those where there's a recommendation to discharge the officer from the CPD, that is, fire the officer, the board is also involved in that process. And those can come about from either the disagreements, or there may be agreement from both the superintendent and the COPA chief administrator to move forward with a discharge case. So the board is involved in deciding these as well. So let me switch gears here. And here is another flow chart that talks about how the board decides discharge cases. So these cases, before they come to the board, have been thoroughly investigated by either COPA or the Police Department's Bureau of Internal Affairs. There's been a recommendation to fire the officer that then moves forward to the police board. The process starts at the police board with charges being filed with the board, so written charges that set forth the rules that the officer is alleged to have violated and includes specific information as to how those rules were allegedly violated. The charges are served on the officer, so the officer is given notice, and then those charges are posted on the police board website so that members of the public can see what types of cases the board has before it. The case is assigned to a hearing officer. The superintendent's represented by lawyers in the Corporation Counsel's office, and the officer is, in nearly every case, represented by her or his attorney. After pre-hearing matters and discovery takes place, so similar to trials in court, where there's various pre-hearing matters and an exchange of discovery, a disciplinary hearing is scheduled and takes place, at which the hearing officer presides on behalf of the board. Witnesses are called to testify under oath. The board has subpoena power to command the appearance of witnesses. And so the hearing, which resembles a trial in court, takes place either at the board's hearing room or more recently, due to the COVID pandemic, via Zoom. Those hearings are open to the public, just as trials in court are. Following the hearing officer makes a written report to the board, makes an oral report, and then the police board itself takes responsibility for deciding the case. So the hearing officer, while presiding, doesn't play a formal role in actually deciding the case. The board is required to decide the case based only on the evidence presented at the hearing. Once the board decides the case, a written decision is prepared. There's a final vote in public at a public meeting where everyone's vote is announced and recorded. And then the detailed written decision, which explains what the findings are and the reasons for the findings, is issued to the parties and posted on the board's website. So that is the process for deciding cases that the board uses. That's our role in the disciplinary process. The board does a variety of other things, but I think most people here are probably interested in the board's role in this process. So that's what I chose to highlight here. So thanks very much.